They shattered you and left. But now they're back. Why? You survived the heartbreak they thought would destroy you. Now they want access to the healed version of you. Should you open the door? They walked away and left you in pieces, broken, silent, and questioning everything you once believed. Maybe you don't even talk about it anymore, but deep down, you remember. You remember the moment they chose to walk out, the moment your world tilted and what felt solid fell apart. It didn't have to be loud. Sometimes the most painful goodbyes don't slam the door, they just slowly fade into absence. One day, they were simply gone. And when they left, they didn't just take their presence. They took parts of you with them. The part of you that loved freely. The part that trusted without second guessing. The part that believed love would be enough. And what did they leave behind? A quiet room filled with doubt, and a reflection in the mirror that made you wonder, was it me? Was I too much, or not enough? That's exactly the space where lies love to whisper. Lies that say you're the problem. Lies that sneak in when you're weakest. And let's be honest, sometimes we believe those lies. Because when you've been broken by someone you gave your all to, it doesn't just hurt. It echoes. It lingers in the way you now flinch at kindness, question love, and build walls where you once built bridges. But hear me now and hold this close. You didn't stay broken. You may have been crushed, but you were not destroyed. You may have hit rock bottom, but you didn't stay there. And that right there, that's the part they never expected. They thought walking out would finish you. They thought breaking you would bury you. But God had a different plan. Because the world may have seen your breakdown, but they didn't stick around for your breakthrough, and that's okay. Let them go. Because God doesn't just heal in spite of our brokenness. He works through it. He takes what was shattered and rebuilds it into something stronger, more radiant, more whole. Have you ever found yourself haunted by the memory of someone who walked away when you needed them most? Lie to reappear when they see how far you've come. Have you felt that curious ache, wondering if those who left you behind truly grasped the weight of what they abandoned, or if they're simply chasing the glow they once overlooked? Let's explore the quiet strength in that fragile moment when the past tries to return. Not as redemption, but as a test of everything you've grown through. They left you in pieces, broken and scattered. And while you may have stopped speaking about it in hushed conversations or tearful whispers to trusted friends, deep down in the quiet corners of your mind you still remember with stark clarity how it felt when they turned their back. How it felt the exact moment they decided to walk away from something you believed was unbreakable. From something you thought would endure every storm, but instead they chose to let go. To vanish into the silence, and maybe it wasn't loud, maybe it wasn't a violent exit, but rather a slow, deliberate fade that left you wondering if the absence was somehow your fault. One day, they just weren't there anymore, and in their leaving, they didn't just take their presence, they didn't just walk out with their laughter or their words, or the warmth of their touch. They took pieces of you that you had given so freely, so earnestly. Pieces of you that trusted without limits, that believed love could conquer any distance, that offered everything with open hands. And in the aftermath of their departure, you were left sitting alone with nothing but your reflection staring back at you in the stillness, asking those endless, gnawing questions. Was it me? Was I too much, or was I simply not enough for them to stay? The enemy, ever so cunning, loves to twist those questions into whispers that burrow deep into the soft places of your soul, loves to feed your mind with lies about your worth and your value. And let's be honest here, sometimes, in the quiet of the night when no one else is around, you believe those lies because when you've given your very best, your brightest love, your truest heart, and someone still decides to walk away, the wound doesn't just sting, it echoes through every part of who you are. Echoes in the way you second-guess every tender word that follows. Echoes in the way you flinch at kindness, in the way you find yourself building walls. Where once you built bridges that stretched so bravely into the hearts of others. But let me tell you something now, and I want you to clutch this truth as if your life depends on it. Because in many ways it does. You didn't stay broken. Even if they thought they had shattered you beyond repair. Because yes, you were crushed beneath the weight of it all. You were brought low and left gasping for air. But you were never, not for one moment, truly destroyed. And while they believed that leaving would be the final blow, the end of your story, they never expected the resilience that God had planted in the very core of who you are. They thought walking away would bury you beneath the rubble of what they broke. But God had a different plan, a greater plan that the world may have never seen. Because while the world bore witness to your breaking, it wasn't there for your breakthrough, and that's perfectly fine. Let them go. Let them drift away like autumn leaves on a cold wind, because the truth is, God doesn't just work in spite of our brokenness, He works right through it, weaving the shards into something more beautiful and whole than what existed before the breaking. You are no longer the same person who watched them walk away, no longer the version of yourself who measured your worth by their decision to stay or leave. Because that season of heartbreak didn't define you, it refined you, burning away everything that was never meant to stay and revealing the strength that lived deep inside. The courage to stand tall even when your heart was on its knees. The ability to cry the deepest tears and then wipe them away and rise anyway. And maybe the greatest miracle of all is that even though they walked away, you're still here, still breathing with lungs full of hope, still building a life that is yours alone, still believing in the possibility of something real and good and sacred. Yes. You carry the scars of that breaking, but those scars are not the marks of weakness. They are the proof of survival, the evidence that you endured what should have taken you out and somehow through it all, emerged stronger, wiser, more sure of your worth than ever before. And now, just when you've found your peace, just when you've reclaimed your strength, they're back, knocking on the door they once slammed shut. And here's the truth you need to remember, just because someone finally wakes up and sees what they lost doesn't mean you owe them the right to walk back into the life you fought so hard to rebuild. Some people come back not because they love you, but because they see your light shining brighter than before. The glow of your healing, the brilliance of your growth. But they didn't stay when that light was only a flicker. They didn't nurture the seed that was buried deep in the soil of your soul. But now they want to taste the fruit. And that's not love, that's convenience. That's regret knocking at your door and hoping you'll forget the cost of your healing. So don't let it in. Don't let the ache of loneliness or the ghosts of old feelings trick you into reopening a wound God has already sealed shut. Because you've come too far and grown too deep and learned too much to ever go back to the place that broke you, not out of bitterness, not out of hate, but because you finally learned the holy power of loving yourself enough to protect your peace and your purpose. As we turn the page and step into what comes next, carry this truth in your heart. What's waiting ahead isn't about who left. It's about the freedom you claimed when you chose to keep walking forward. And burdened by the weight of what tried to keep you down, pain has a way of showing up uninvited, like an unexpected storm that rolls in without warning, crashing through your life and stripping away every illusion of safety and control you thought you had, leaving you standing there with nothing but the trembling of your own heart and the raw truth that the people you trusted the most, the ones you thought would never be the cause of your deepest hurt, are sometimes the very ones who break you in the most devastating ways. And when that pain hits, it shakes you to your core. It tears away the comfort and the familiarity you once held so tightly. It leaves you staring at the cracked foundation of everything you thought was solid, wondering if you'll ever be able to rebuild what was lost, But let me tell you, this pain is not a punishment, even though it feels like the sharpest blade in the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts. Because pain, that soul-deep, spirit-crushing pain, is often the very classroom where God teaches us the most powerful lessons of our lives, what they meant to use against you, to tear you apart and leave you doubting everything about who you are. God has a way of turning it into the very thing that develops you, that strengthens you, that grows you into someone you never imagined you could be, and that breaking they tried to bury you with, it wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of something new, something deeper and truer than anything you knew before the breaking, because you didn't just sit in that pain and let it swallow you whole. No. You cried through it, but you also grew through it. And even though in the moment it felt like punishment, looking back, can't you see the shift that happened in the quiet spaces of your soul? You prayed different prayers, prayers that came from a place of desperation and hope all tangled together. Prayers that reached up through the darkness and said, God, I can't do this on my own. And in those prayers, you found a strength that had nothing to do with the people who left and everything to do with the one who never does. You started to move differently, to see people not for the potential you hoped they would live up to, but for who they really are. And in that clarity, you stopped chasing validation, stopped begging for love in places that only drained you, and you started listening to the quiet voice inside that always knew the truth, even when you didn't want to hear it. That pain, as much as it cut you, birthed something new in you. It birthed clarity, it birthed strength. It pulled from the depths of your spirit a resilience that comfort could never call forth. And it revealed every blind spot, every place where you had given too much of yourself away, every pattern you clung to out of habit instead of healing, and most of all, it revealed your need for God in a way that nothing else ever could, because it's in that kind of pain, the pain that brings you to your knees with nothing left to hold on to, that you finally stop reaching for people who were never meant to carry you and start reaching for the one who always will. And in that surrender, in that moment, when you finally let go of what you thought you had to hold, healing begins, not from the outside in like the world tries to promise, but from the inside out, where God breathes life back into the places you thought would never heal. And here's the part that's so important to remember: the same people who caused that pain, who walked away when you were bleeding from the inside out, they didn't stay to witness your transformation. They didn't sit with you in the dark or hold your hand through the nights when you didn't think you'd make it. They saw the breakdown, but they were never part of the breakthrough. And that matters when they try to come back and act like the healing they see in you now is something they have a right to. Because some people only want the version of you that pain produced, the version that rose from the ashes stronger and wiser. But they didn't stay for the fire that refined you, and they will never know the weight you carried, the prayers you whispered when no one else was listening, the tears you cried in the silence when it felt like you would never feel whole again. And because of that, they don't get to waltz back in as if they have any claim to the healed, whole person you've become. God used that pain, every sleepless night, and every anxious thought, every moment when you doubted your worth or felt invisible in the mirror of someone else's rejection, not because he wanted you to suffer endlessly, but because he was preparing you for something far greater than anything you lost when they walked away, something rooted in him and not in their approval or acceptance. And sometimes, that pain wasn't even about them. It was about shaking you free from the people and the patterns that couldn't come with you where God was leading you. And as much as it hurt, and I know it hurt, it was always for a purpose bigger than the heartbreak, because it taught you how to stop begging for scraps of love and start standing in the fullness of your worth. How to stop shrinking your soul to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold the healed version of you. Now, you carry that perspective like a shield. You hold that wisdom in the marrow of your bones, and you walk forward with a discernment that only comes from the fire, so don't you dare be ashamed of the pain you've endured or the lessons it taught you. Because those lessons are your armor now, they're the quiet strength in your voice, the unwavering peace in your spirit. And they are the reason you can stand in front of anyone who tries to come back into your life and say, with quiet confidence, I know who I am now. And I will not go back to what broke me. So as we move forward, let's carry this hard-won truth together, because it's not just about healing from the pain. It's about honoring the growth that came through it, and making sure that what God rebuilt in you isn't given away to someone who never stayed for the breaking in the first place. You see, when the people who broke you decide to return, they often come back not because they suddenly discovered some new well of love for you in their hearts, but because they can't shake the memory of how you made them feel, of the way your light wrapped around their shadows and your kindness covered over their shortcomings like a warm blanket on a winter night, because they remember the safety of your presence, the way your love became a shelter when they had no home in their own hearts. But what they don't understand is that just because they miss what they lost doesn't mean they're ready or even capable of handling the person you've become in the aftermath of it all. They might come with words that sound sweet on the surface, with apologies wrapped in half-truths, and promises they themselves aren't sure they can keep. But the truth is, real change doesn't come dressed up in carefully chosen words, it shows itself in actions. In the quiet consistency of someone who has learned, who has grown, who has done the work to become more than the person who caused the pain in the first place. And healing, true healing, doesn't make you forget the past or wipe away the memories of how it felt to be broken. It simply gives you the clarity to learn from it, to gather the wisdom hidden in every tear you shed and every prayer you whispered in the night. Sometimes, and I know this truth stings even as it sets you free, people don't come back because they want to love you better. They come back because they're haunted by the echo of the way you loved them, the way you poured yourself out even when you were running on empty, the way you carried their burdens without ever asking them to lighten yours. And they come back not for you, but for the memory of what you gave so selflessly, a memory they want to feel again, even if only for a moment. But don't let that nostalgia trap you. Don't confuse their longing for what you were with readiness to honor who you are now. Because just because someone regrets what they lost doesn't mean they're ready to stand beside the person who rose from the ashes of that heartbreak. And your healing journey wasn't a revolving door for them to walk through whenever they feel the weight of your absence pressing in on them. You see, you've learned to walk again spiritually, emotionally, and maybe even physically. You've learned to breathe without needing their validation, to look in the mirror and see someone worthy of love, not because they say so, but because God Himself declared it when He wove you together with care and purpose. And now, when they come knocking, it's not your job to make space for them in a life they didn't help build back up from the ground. It's not your duty to hand over the keys to a heart they once treated like it was disposable. You didn't endure those long nights of silent prayers and tear-stained pillows just to let someone who wasn't there for the battle step into the victory like they have any right to it. Because the healing you fought for, the peace you clawed your way back to, it came at a cost. A sacred cost that no one but you and God truly knows, and that cost is too precious to squander on someone who walked away when you needed them most. And here's the thing that the enemy wants you to forget. You didn't survive all that breaking and all that rebuilding just to hand yourself back over to the same hands that shattered you. Because you're not being cold or unforgiving by choosing to protect the space within you that God has restored. You're simply honoring the journey He walked you through, honoring the nights He sat with you when no one else did, and you're finally learning that the healing He gave you isn't something to be offered carelessly to those who didn't stay to see the cost. So let them come back. Let them remember the warmth of your love, the depth of your kindness. But don't let them mistake that memory for an invitation. Because peace is not a playground for those who didn't fight to build it with you, and you have every right, every divine right, to guard it like the treasure is. Knowing deep in your spirit that you are no longer the person who will bend and break to make someone else feel whole. As we move ahead, hold on to this truth. Your healing wasn't just about surviving the heartbreak. It was about learning to cherish the sanctity of the person you've become through it. And sometimes that means closing the door gently but firmly, and walking forward with a heart that is finally your own. You know, there's something about the process of healing that changes you from the inside out, that teaches you to value your peace and your energy in ways you never even thought to protect before. Because when you've spent night after night wrestling with the ache of what was lost, and day after day learning how to breathe again without the weight of someone else's absence pressing against your ribs, you start to see that not everyone who once held a place in your heart deserves to be handed a key to the healed version of you that you fought so hard to reclaim. And it's not about bitterness. It's not about holding on to old wounds or refusing to forgive. It's about understanding that the very act of healing has given you eyes to see things you never saw before, to recognize the patterns you once called love but were really just echoes of your own desperation to be chosen by someone who never knew how to honor what they were being given. And that shift in your spirit, that quiet awakening, is the reason you no longer flinch at the idea of standing alone. Because you've realized that standing alone in your own truth is far safer, far more sacred, than being surrounded by people who only showed up for the parts of you they wanted to consume. And so when they come back, with soft words and carefully chosen apologies, with stories of how they've changed or how they finally see what they couldn't see before, you don't have to hate them. You don't have to close your heart with iron bars or build bitterness like a fortress around your spirit, but you also don't have to let them in. Because your healing is not a stage for them to make a reappearance. It's not a chance for them to prove something to you or to themselves. Because you've learned that the most powerful kind of love you can offer someone else is the love you first learned to give yourself. You see, there's a tenderness in your spirit now. A stillness that doesn't tremble at every knock on the door. Because you know that some returns are not acts of redemption. They're simply nostalgia in disguise, a longing for what was never truly appreciated in the first place. And you've come to understand that nostalgia is not the same as restoration, no matter how sweet the words or how sincere the apologies sound in the quiet hours when your heart wants to believe them. And that's why you've stopped explaining your worth to people who only ever saw it when it served their comfort. Why you've stopped shrinking yourself to fit into the spaces that were never meant to hold the fullness of who you are now. Because you know that you didn't walk through the fire, you didn't weep those prayers in the midnight hours, you didn't rise from the ashes of your own heartbreak, just to hand the healed version of you back to the same hands that didn't know how to keep it safe the first time. There's a wisdom in your soul now, a clarity in your eyes, that sees beyond the words and the promises, that knows how to discern the difference between someone who comes with true intention and someone who comes only because they miss how your light once made their darkness feel less empty. And you no longer feel the need to carry the weight of other people's regrets on your shoulders like a burden you were born to bear. So when they come back, let them see how your peace glows from the inside out, how your laughter sounds different now that it's no longer tangled in the ache of being too much or not enough for someone who couldn't see your worth. But don't let that glow become an invitation for them to step into the sacred space that you rebuilt brick by brick, prayer by prayer. Because you know in the marrow of your bones that God didn't bring you this far just so you could go back to the place that tried to break you. And as we look ahead to the next chapter, remember this with quiet strength. You don't owe anyone the healed version of you, not even the ones who helped write the chapters of your heartbreak, because the healing was between you and the one who held you in the dark. And it is yours to protect, to cherish, and to honor as the holy gift it is. And as you stand there, on the threshold of what used to be and what is now, you begin to realize that healing has taught you to guard the soil of your soul like a tender gardener, nurturing the roots of your peace and refusing to let the weeds of old wounds take hold again. Because you know now that some gardens are not meant to be shared with those who only trampled the seeds once planted in blind hope. It's a strange and beautiful thing to see how the very cracks they left in you have become the places where the light gets in, where new growth and new life have found a way to bloom in ways you never thought possible when you were still picking up the shattered pieces of your heart. And in that blooming, in that gentle, patient becoming, you see that God was never punishing you in the breaking. He was preparing you for a kind of love that begins within. A love that no longer seeks validation from those who never stayed to see your worth. You've learned that your voice, once silenced by the weight of someone else's leaving, has become the anthem of your own resilience. That every word you speak now carries the quiet authority of someone who has walked through the fire and found themselves still standing on the other side. And in that authority, you know you don't need to justify the boundaries you set or the doors you choose not to open, because those choices are the fruit of the healing you cultivated in the dark. There's no need to explain to anyone why you choose to hold your peace close, why you choose to stand firm in the truth that not everyone who says they love you is meant to stay. Because you've seen with your own eyes how love is more than a promise whispered in the night. It's a daily practice, a sacred tending to the hearts we choose to keep in our lives, and you refuse to let someone who didn't water your spirit when it was parched be the one to taste the harvest of your healing now. You've discovered a quiet courage within you, and knowing that some stories are meant to be left in the past, not because you haven't forgiven, but because you finally see that forgiveness doesn't mean you have to open the door again. It doesn't mean you have to let the one who left come back and take up space in the home you've built within yourself, a home filled with light and laughter and the tender presence of God's hand in every detail. So let them knock. Let them whisper about how they've changed, how they miss the way your love once felt like a balm for their restless soul. But hold fast to the truth that your healing was never theirs to claim. Because the path you've walked, every step taken in quiet faith and trembling hope, has made you wiser, softer in some places, stronger in others, and you've learned that not every echo of the past deserves an answer. And as you close the door on what no longer belongs in your life, do it not with bitterness, not with anger, but with the serene certainty that your peace is worth protecting. That your heart is a garden that flourishes best when tended by those who see its sacredness. And that sometimes the most profound expression of love for yourself and for them is to let the past stay where it belongs and keep walking forward into the light of everything that's waiting to bloom in you. You see, healing is a sacred journey that doesn't just transform your heart, it transforms your entire way of seeing the world, opening your eyes to the quiet strength that lives within you and teaching you to see your own worth with a clarity that no one else's opinion can ever diminish. And when the person who broke you tries to return, you begin to understand that their absence was not just a wound, it was also revelation. A gentle yet fierce awakening to the truth that you are enough, even when someone else didn't have the capacity to see it. And so, when they come back, you no longer feel the need to prove your worth or to chase after the kind of closure that never truly comes from someone else's mouth, because you've learned that closure is not found in the explanations or apologies of those who left. It's found in the quiet decision to stop giving your energy to places that only drained you, To stop handing over the softest parts of your soul to someone who treated them like they were disposable, and to finally believe that your wholeness doesn't depend on whether someone sees it or not. You realize that there is no redemption in words alone. No real change in promises whispered late at night when guilt and loneliness sound too much like love, because you've seen that true change doesn't come in grand gestures or flowery words. It comes in the steady, patient work of someone who has faced their own darkness and decided to become better, not just for you, but because they finally understand the cost of breaking what was never meant to be broken. And you no longer feel the pull to return to a story that left you questioning your value, because you've tasted the freedom that comes from standing on your own 2 feet. The peace that settles over your spirit when you know, deep down, that you don't need to be chosen by someone else to be whole. Because you were never meant to carry the burden of being someone else's salvation. Your soul was crafted for more than trying to fix what was never yours to mend. So now, when they come back with regret in their eyes and longing in their voice, you see through the surface of it all. You see the pattern you once called love but now recognize as an echo of your own fear of being alone, and you remember every silent night when God met you in your brokenness, and whispered that you were never alone at all, that your worth was never tied to who walked away or who stayed, but to the one who formed you with a purpose far greater than anyone else's understanding. And that is why you can stand there, calm and unwavering, and know that you don't have to open the door again, not because you hate them, not because you're bitter, but because you finally see the sacredness of the healing God brought you through, the beauty of the person you became in the quiet hours when no one else was watching, and you know that you won't trade that peace for another round of confusion or heartbreak. No matter how sweet the words or how sincere the apologies, you've outgrown the version of yourself who needed to be chosen by someone who didn't know how to choose you. Outgrown the spaces where you used to shrink yourself just to keep the peace. And that growth wasn't just a season you survived, it was a holy unveiling of your strength. A revelation of the divine image within you that can never be diminished by someone else's inability to see. And now, as you stand in the quiet aftermath of everything that's been lost and everything that's been found, you hold your peace like a promise, knowing that the most powerful thing you can say to someone who once broke you is nothing at all. Because your healing speaks for itself. Your boundaries are the quiet testament to your worth. And your future is no longer something you're willing to gamble on the chance that someone else might finally see what was there all along. So let them come back. Let them see what they lost. Let them feel the weight of the absence they created. But don't mistake their regret for a reason to let them back in, because you've walked too far and fought too hard to ever return to the place that taught you how to stand in the first place. As we prepare to step into the final chapter of this story, remember this: your healing was never meant to be a welcome mat for the one who wounded you. It is a sacred doorway for you to keep walking boldly forward into the life God has always dreamed for you. Because you see, there's something profound and unshakable about the peace that comes after you've walked through the fire of heartbreak and emerged on the other side, not untouched by the flames, but transformed by them, carrying in your spirit the kind of quiet strength that no one can take from you. No matter how many times they try to come back and slip through the cracks of your resolve. It's a peace that doesn't come cheap. A peace that was born in the nights when you lay awake with tears that no one else could see, in the mornings when you got up and chose to keep going even though your heart was still raw and your faith was clinging to whispers of hope. And you know, with a clarity that feels holy in its simplicity, that this peace was never meant to be shared with someone who didn't stay when the storm raged the loudest. Because there is a sacredness to what you've built in the quiet aftermath of it all, a sanctuary of your own making, a space filled with the light of your healing and the echoes of prayers that only you and God know. And you understand now that not every hand that knocks deserves to be welcomed back in. No matter how familiar the voice or how heavy the ache of old memories still lingering in the corners of your heart, and though they might come back with words of longing, with a softened gaze that speaks of the things they didn't know how to hold before, you know that true healing has taught you to look past the sweetness of words and see the fruit of real change, to recognize that redemption doesn't live in apologies alone but in the consistent, not something that can be measured by the return of someone who once didn't know how to stay. And that is why you can hold your head high and let them feel the weight of the distance between the person you were and the person you have become, not with cruelty, not with coldness, but with a quiet reverence for the journey that brought you here, because you finally see that the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to refuse to hand the keys of your heart back to someone who once turned them in without a second thought. You've learned that some chapters are meant to end, not out of anger, but out of the wisdom that comes from finally seeing the truth that your wholeness was never dependent on someone else's ability to love you well, and you've discovered that there is a freedom in that truth. A liberation that sets your soul soaring in ways you never thought possible when you were still tangled in the ache of what was lost. So as you take this final step in the story, as you close the door with gentle hands and a spirit anchored in peace, remember that you are not closing it out of fear or because you are hard-hearted, but because you have finally learned to love yourself enough to know that you deserve more than someone who only saw your light when it served their darkness. And with every quiet breath and every steady step, you walk forward into the life God has prepared for you, a life where the past no longer holds you hostage, where the echoes of old heartbreaks have become the foundations of your strength, and where the only voice that matters is the one that has always whispered to your soul that you are enough, that you are worthy, and that you are more than the sum of who walked away and who came back. Let them see the light they once took for granted. Let them feel the echo of your absence in the quiet spaces they tried to fill with regret. But hold fast to the truth that your healing was never for them, it was always for you. And it is the doorway to a future that no one but God can shape. So here we are, standing at the edge of everything that was and everything that could be, holding in our hands the quiet power of a story that refused to end in the shadows of what once broke us. And if there is one thing I hope you carry with you as you close this chapter, it's the unwavering truth that healing is not just about patching up the wounds of the past, it's about reclaiming the wholeness that was always yours to begin with. The wholeness that no one's leaving could ever truly steal. Because you see, healing isn't a destination or a final point you arrive at one day when the pain is gone and the echoes have grown quiet. It's a living, breathing journey of becoming. A daily choice to honor your own heart and to stand in the quiet confidence of someone who has learned that their worth is not defined by who stayed or who left, but by the one who created them with purpose and intention long before any heartbreak or betrayal ever touched their soul. And maybe there are days when you'll still feel the tug of old memories, days when the ache of what was lost tries to pull you back into stories that no longer fit the shape of who you've become. But let those days be reminders, not of what you lack, but of the courage it took to rise from those places, to build a life that feels like home in your own skin, and to refuse to let someone else's inability to see your worth become the lens through which you see yourself. Because you are not here to live in the shadows of someone else's choices, you are here to stand in the light of your own growth, to tend to the garden of your soul with gentle hands and a steadfast heart, to remember that every scar you carry is a testament to the strength that lives within you. Not a sign of weakness or failure, but a reminder that you have survived things that could have destroyed you, and you have turned them into fuel for your becoming. And in that becoming, there is a freedom so profound that it can't be measured in apologies or in the fleeting affections of those who once couldn't stay. Because real freedom isn't found in someone else's arms, it's found in the quiet decision to choose yourself every single day, to honor the work of healing that no one else saw, to refuse to hand over the keys of your heart to anyone who doesn't know how to cherish them. So let this be your anthem. Let this be the truth that settles in your bones like a sacred vow. You are worthy of a love that is steady and kind. A love that sees you not as a temporary shelter from someone else's storms, but as a sacred home where they are invited to stay. And until you find that, you will keep your peace close, keep your heart safe, and keep walking forward into the future God is crafting just for you. Because you didn't walk through all that fire just to hand your healing back to the same hands that once let you burn. You walked through it to become someone who knows their worth, who values their peace, and who understands that healing isn't just about surviving the past, it's about thriving in the present, about standing tall in the light of everything you've overcome, and about opening your hands to receive the blessings that come when you finally learn that you are enough, just as you are. So let them come back if they must. Let them knock on doors that no longer open. But remember that you have already stepped into a future where your heart is safe, your spirit is whole, and your life is no longer defined by who walked away, but by the one who has always held you through it all. This is your season to rise, to embrace the fullness of who you are, and to keep walking forward in faith and in hope, knowing that the best chapters of your story are still being written. Chapters filled not with echoes of what was lost, but with the promise of everything that is yet to come. So as you stand here, at the threshold of your own healing and the promise of what comes next, I want you to pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and remember this: the journey you're on is not just about closing doors, it's about opening the ones that lead to the kind of love and peace that will never ask you to break yourself into pieces just to fit in. I want you to look in the mirror and speak these words over yourself: I am enough. I am worthy. I am whole. Let them echo in the quiet spaces of your heart until they feel like the most natural truth you've ever known. Because that truth, it's the foundation of everything you're building, and it's the light that will guide you through every choice you make from this moment forward. If these words have resonated with you today, if you feel that quiet stirring in your soul telling you that you're ready to step into a new chapter of wholeness and self-love, then don't let this just be another video you watch or another story you hear. Let it be a catalyst for change. Let it be the push you need to start protecting your peace like the treasure is, to start saying no to what no longer serves you and yes to the healing that is calling your name. So here's what I want you to do next. Take one small step today. One act of courage that honors the healing you've already fought so hard to find. Maybe it's writing down the boundaries you're going to start setting. Maybe it's taking a quiet moment in prayer to ask God for the strength to keep moving forward. Maybe it's sharing this message with someone who needs the reminder that they, too, are worthy of the kind of love that stays. Whatever that step looks like for you, take it boldly. Take it knowing that every time you choose yourself, every time you honor your healing, you're not just protecting your past, you're shaping your future. And if you're ready to keep walking this journey with me, to keep growing and healing and becoming everything you were always meant to be, then hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join me here because we're not done yet. There's so much more waiting for you, and I can't wait to walk beside you as we discover it together. This is your story to write, your life to live, and your heart to protect, and it's never been more beautiful, more holy, or more worth fighting for. Thank you for your listening. Goodbye and see you in the next video.